I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, someone who has taken the lead in speaking up for the needs of healthcare workers, especially nurses, throughout the pandemic. Amie Archibald-Varley is a social political healthcare advocate, an experienced nurse, and co-hosts the Gritty Nurse podcast, one of the top podcasts in medicine in Canada. Based on her experience within healthcare and health equity advocacy, Amie shares how leaders in any industry can lead with compassion and empathy. She's also director of the multimedia at Canada AM, a community for emergency medicine practitioners. She's a former quality and patient safety specialist for emergency services, now recently moved into a role in health equity with women and babies. An anti-racism activist with Sanya's Indigenous cultural safety training, she inspires others to speak their truth and brings communities together to engage in courageous conversations. She's a popular speaker and event moderator, as well as a frequent medical contributor in major media like the CBC, CTV, Globe and Mail, and Chatelaine. And you can hear her weekly as a smart speaker on The Rush on News Talk 1010, actually today at 4:30. Please join me in welcoming Amie Archibald-Varley.
Thank you all so much for your kind words. I mean, I think that one of the things I've learned, and I had learned from just actually one of my bosses, his name was Fred, that life is a journey. So I really hope that today we can go on a journey together, talking about how we could transform our teams through compassion and empathy. So before I get started, I'd like to let you all know that my pronouns are she and her. And I know we did a land acknowledgement, but I'm going to do another little one here as well. So I come to you from the city of Hamilton, which is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, and the Hautenosaunees and the Mississaugas. So again, this land is covered by the dish with one spoon wampum belt covenant, which is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the natural resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do much more to learn about the truth and reconciliation and the rich history of this land so we could better understand our roles as settlers, residents, neighbors, and partners and caretakers. This agreement is also a covenant with nature, so take what you need, leave something in the dish for others, and please keep the dish clean. I stand in solidarity with all Indigenous people today and always. Just like we said previously, I encourage you to visit the I believe it is called, sorry, I'm going to say it wrong, sorry, visit Native Land or download the Whose Land app to find out more about the lands in which you live and work on. I also want to acknowledge those who came before us on the lands known today as Canada forcibly as a result of the transatlantic slave. And therefore, I want to pay honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. So before we get started, I kind of like doing a little bit of an icebreaker. And I know it's really difficult on Zoom, but I think it can still work for these purposes. And I like to do something called two truths and a lie. So it's hard to do the raise your hand function. So I just want to put these statements out there and I want you to think to yourself, what are the two truthful statements and which one might be a lie? So here we go. So I would like to start with saying that I am obsessed with horror movies. The other statement could be is I have spoken to a Marvel superhero. And the last statement is I do not like contact sports. So which one do you think might be the truth? And which one do you think might be a lie? Well, if you've guessed that the lie is that I don't like contact sports, it is a lie. So I do like contact sports. I actually have my white belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's actually something I do for my own mental health to keep myself sane. So, but now I also have some tougher questions and things that I'd like to talk to you folks about today. Think about this. In the last year, have you considered leaving your job due to mental health stress? Have you considered utilizing mental health stress resources within the past year? Do you feel that mental health is valued within your workplace? Have you been stigmatized or potentially stigmatized others for having mental health challenges? These questions aren't as fun as the icebreaker activity that I just talked about, but these are hugely important conversations that we must have, It's so much easier to talk about the fluff and the easy stuff than it is to talk about mental health. But I want you to come on this journey with me today. So, the last 2 years, we have continued to witness the impact of the pandemic and how it has impacted our lives. Within many industries, communities, the pandemic has left all of our tanks on empty. So, what do we do now? More than ever, we as leaders, we must commit to the ongoing work of creating environments that are supportive, inspiring, and attractive so we can continue to work and function within our communities or workplaces and within our homes. We've been met with many challenges, but now we actually have a very unique opportunity to do something radically different. It's time to look at how we might change the conversation within our workplaces, our schools, and communities to strengthen relationships and make partnerships much more strong. We can do this by leading with compassion and empathy. It sounds like a very simple concept, but it is actually quite difficult. And we need to think about how we have been impacted, how our folks might be suffering with moral injury and stress and strain over the last few years, and how our leadership may impact and make change in terms of the way that people come to work and enjoy the work that they're doing with us on a day-to-day basis. We have to have a mindset that is transformative. We want to think about restoring mental health, satisfaction, and productivity within our work environments. So thinking about the current state of your organization or wherever you're working at this point in time, what do you think the state of your team's mental health is? How might you know this? Have you asked your team? Have you asked your folks? What have they said? If you haven't asked, how can we fix a problem that we know nothing about? One of the things that I would like to urge you to do today is invest in finding that information out. Finding out what the current state of your organizational culture is hugely impactful in terms of that transformative leadership and redefining how empathy and compassion can look within your workplace. I urge you to continue to do something radically different when it comes to finding out how your folks and your staff members have been affected over the last 2 years. Simon Fraser University had identified several psychosocial factors which have been based on extensive research and review of empirical data from national and international best practices. There are 13 factors. I'll touch on them all briefly today in terms of thinking about how this may impact your organizational health and individuals' well-being within their workspace. So the first psychosocial factor that you want to think about is balance. What is the state of balance within your workplace and within your work environment? How does that individual look at that state of well-being and understand how that interacts within their work environment, within their home, within their community? Is there a balance? Is there a balance that can be achieved? And balance can look different for everyone. Balance also looks at physical, emotional, social, and within your community and within your community health. And it also looks at grief, stress, and negative impact. So would you say that there's overall balance? Civility and respect. I can't talk about this more. It looks at what are the engagement and what are the respectful and considerate interactions that happen with one another, with your customers, with your clients, with the public, within your own staff. What do these look like? This is a foundational aspect. Treat me like an adult. How do we continue to acknowledge individuals' dignity? Do we set clear expectations and clear leadership? So a workplace where there is effective leadership and support can help employees know what they need to do, how their work contributes to the greater organization, and whether there are impending changes. Having clear expectations and knowing what to expect is also another huge factor that we must account for. Engagement. How often have we talked about engagement? Engagement also means connectiveness. Does the person who is working with you feel connected to the environment or can relate to the overall commitments that are set out for our organizations and overall successes? Engagement shouldn't be mistaken for job satisfaction. I've seen various times where those two terms have been used interchangeably, and they're not the same. Engagement is not the same as job satisfaction. Employee engagement can also be looking at the physical aspects, so the actual doing of the job, emotional aspects. So are you passionate, or are your staff passionate about the work that they're doing? And then also the cognitive aspect, whether they're paying attention to the type of work that needs to be done. Growth and development are also huge, important psychosocial risk factors. Do you continue to encourage and support the development of your staff within your workplace, their emotional and job skills? And what is possible? Are there opportunities that you can continue to afford for folks that are working with you? And are you building off of their repertoire of competencies? We always want to build for future opportunities for our staff. Is there involvement and influence? Do you feel, or does your staff feel included in the decisions that are being made within their workplace, and how important it is to include them? This is actually something that I found really important as a leader as well. If I wasn't part of the decisions, I didn't feel a part of the work. So having said that, it's so important to include your folks within decision makings and within the influence and influencing some of the decisions that can be made. Organizational culture. What is the overall culture within your workplace? I think that a workplace that's characterized by trust, honesty, integrity, fairness, beliefs, and understanding those fundamental principles can really impact the way that we work within our environments. What does that culture look like? Are we fostering a culture of empathy and of compassion? And if not, what are the things that we need to do to change to make sure that we are ensuring those principles? There's also the aspects of looking at protection of physical safety, psychological safety, and psychological support. I can't stress these aspects enough. Thinking about myself as a nurse, going into a workplace where, at some point in time during the pandemic, I was heckled, I was yelled at, I was spat at. Those are really concerning aspects. And we have to think about, are we providing spaces that we're supporting individuals? We're making sure that they're kept and made to feel safe. Do we have policies and procedures in place to support individuals? Recognition and reward. Have you asked your employees and your staff and folks what they see as a recognition and reward? I think we tend to say, okay, we're going to do a barbecue, we're going to do a pizza party, but are those the things that our employees and our staff want? Acknowledgement is hugely important, but it's also important to acknowledge what they think is the best form of acknowledgement. Meet people where they are. The other aspect is workload management. A workplace where tasks and responsibilities are accomplished successfully need to also be attainable. Having a large workload is a huge burden and a huge stress. And these are things that we must pay attention to. We have to couple that with what is expected versus what we need to do, and also manage some of our own expectations. So examining these 13 factors, and there's much more that can be said about all of these factors, is a really good starting point in understanding your current state of where your organization might be. But also, let's talk about the effects. What are the effects if we don't assess our organization? We don't have a current state and understanding where we are in terms of compassion and empathy within our workplace. The negative effects are tenfold. I can list so many negative effects in terms of what will happen and what we have seen happen in terms of if we don't support our workers. But we also know that effective leadership increases employee morale. It increases the grit that individuals can have while working within these walls and these spaces. And it also can impact trust and trusting relationships. It can also decrease employee frustration and conflicts within the job. Good leadership results in employees with higher job well-being, reduced sick leave, and reduced early retirements. One of the things I'd like to say to you, and I really want you all to think about this because it's hugely important, is 3 simple words. Please be kind. Everyone that you meet is fighting a battle that you do not know about. And I want to tell you today, The perception and image that society and social media puts on us and creates for us is overwhelmingly troublesome. The perfect hair, body, well-adjusted, perfectly poised, non-argumentative, successful, powerful, professional, productivity. I can go on and on listing a variety of different, expectations that we have. But honestly, a lot of it is a facade. Navigating through this crazy world is so difficult, and especially within the over the past 2 years, we have to think about how this may impact how our workers may be coming into a work. It's not just about the place that we go to and where we work. We have to think about what happens within our communities, what's happening within our families, what's happening within our societies. It is a 2, 3, 4-way street. Everyone will struggle with mental health at some point in time. So in terms of some statistics that I've seen, in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians will experience mental health. And by the time Canadians are 40 years of age, 1 in 2 will have had or described having an instance or case of mental health illness. People with mental health and substance use disorders are more likely to die prematurely than the general population. And mental illness can cut 10 to 20 years from a person's life expectancy. This doesn't even account for intersectionality. We're not discussing, even within these stats, it doesn't account for LGBT communities, racialized folks, or folks with disabilities. Those statistics aren't built in. And if we actually calculated them, because Canada does not collect race-based data, I'd only imagine how devastating that they would actually be. There's also so much stigma when it comes to talking about mental health and mental illness. I just mentioned in the previously that 1 in 5 Canadians will experience mental health or have a mental health illness. That's about 7 million of us. Despite how common it is, mental illness continues to be met with widespread stigma within the workplace, within hospitals, within schools, within rural communities, within our families, within communities, even among close friends. Mental health has no barriers. It's not confined by national boundaries or cultural groups. And reducing stigma requires change in behaviors, attitudes towards acceptance, respect, and equitable treatment of people with mental health problems and mental health illness. We also can see the economic costs and the fallouts of not dealing with mental health and the ramifications therein. The annual economic cost of mental health illness within Canada is estimated over $50 billion per year. This includes healthcare costs, lost productivity, and reductions in health-related quality of life. The cost of workplace disability for a mental health leave is about double the cost of leave due to a physical illness. I want you to really think about that. Investing in mental health has been shown to produce net cost benefits. A positive return on investment has been demonstrated for health promotion and illness prevention programs, early interventions aimed at children and families, scaled up treatments for depression and anxiety disorders, and overall having a great wellness program within the workplace. So I want to kind of touch quickly on my story. I had an opportunity, or I had an experience where I experienced mental health stress on the job. It was very, very difficult. I remember experiencing gaslighting, remember experiencing bullying and harassment, and it really devastated me. I did end up leaving that position and moving to another position, but again, it felt like I was starting something new, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what I might encounter. And I actually met the best boss possible. I'll kind of talk about him a little bit later after as well. And I call it meeting Fred, and he led through compassion. One of the things that he used to say to me all the time was, Amie, life is a journey. How do we continue to connect through compassion? Empathy is a vital leadership competency, and it's probably the biggest management skill that we need today within our workplace. Compassionate leadership means having the ability to understand the needs of others and being aware of their feelings. Unfortunately, it's long been viewed as a non-essential or a soft skill, but research has actually shown that empathy within the workplace positively influences job performance. So how do we do this, or how might we do this? We can do this by facilitating courageous conversations or having conversations such as empathy circles. And this is another topic I can continue talking about because empathy circles are hugely important. One of the things that Fred used to say when we had our discussions on empathy circles is what happens in the circle stays in the circle. Engagement is important for individual satisfaction and psychological health, and it leads to increased profitability for a company, greater customer satisfaction, enhanced task performance, greater morale, greater motivation, and increased organizational citizenship between people. So just seeing greater relationships with the folks that you work with on a daily basis. So how do we continue to demonstrate leadership through compassion? I'm going to give you 4 quick tips. Watch for signs and symptoms of burnout within others. As leaders, we have to be skilled at having empathetic leadership, and we have to be able to actually recognize the symptoms and signs of overwork within our teams, because burnout is a huge issue. We will see that disengagement, we'll see that turnover, but it is our job and our responsibility to ensure that we're watching for those signs and symptoms so we can kind of deal with the problem before they come. We also just have to show a sincere interest in people's hopes, dreams, and aspirations. I can't stress more how important that is. This is something that Fred talked about all of the time. We also just have to demonstrate a willingness to help one another with our personal problems. The lines between work and personal life have become much more blurred, and empathetic leaders understand that their team members are dynamic individuals who are shouldering personal problems as well as coming in to maintain professional working relationships and responsibilities. Recognizing that is part of our role to lead and to continue to support members that we work with within our teams. And also, another one, show compassion when other people have experienced a loss. The last 2 years have been challenging. Many of us have faced various different losses, and using that empathy and compassion and showing compassion in these times can make a huge difference. So again, the role of your place in terms of your employment: no blame, no shame. Let's call it out as we see it. Otherwise, maybe call me and I'll tweet about it. Make sure that you're showing you have preventative models and preventative models of care, wellness programs that will work for your workers and that show and have proven to show value. Make sure that there are supports and plans in place for a staff member returning from a mental health leave, or ensuring continuity of care, or looking at how do we incorporate trauma-informed care models. Also, what are the resources that you have for mental health benefits, time off, extensions on projects, and also just having that space where someone can feel that they can reach out and talk to you about the challenges that may be presented in front of them. So I want to quickly revisit the story with Fred. I know I'm running out of time, but I want to let you know about the best boss that I ever had. I had to send him off because he did retire this year, which was very sad, but I had to send him off with a letter of appreciation. And I just want to quickly read this letter quickly. This is a token of appreciation for my boss who is soon retiring. I don't think he has Twitter, but I really feel that I need to say something about him and how he impacted my life at a time that was very difficult. So this is a quick little thread. It's not every day that you find a great boss. I had applied to Niagara Health after having a devastating time after my previous employer. Like I said, I was gaslighted, I was belittled, I was dehumanized, and my mental health suffered. I didn't think that healthcare was the environment that was going to be right for me anymore. I remember when I first interviewed, meeting the kind faces. So Sonia and Fred were the ones that interviewed me. But there were others too, other friendly faces. But of course, I was very guarded from my last and previous experiences, because sometimes what you see on the outside is not necessarily what might happen in the walls. I was very guarded, but I had a really good interview, and I left there feeling like, oh, these guys seem nice. They seem too nice. But I wanted to try something new, and I got good vibes from the team and being there. I remember Fred's kind face and felt, he seems like a nice guy. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. Long story short, they wanted me. I joined the team. Instantly, I loved the transparency and was ready for whatever was coming next. But Fred showed compassion through leadership. He was just simply kind to me. I didn't have to divulge all of the things that I was going through, but one of the things was he took the time to listen. He took the time to have monthly meetings with us to connect with us. No boss was perfect, but Fred was perfect for me. He was calm, he was cool, he was collected, and he allowed me to grow. He asked me questions and he challenged me and gave me the time and the space to critically think. He always said to me that life is a journey. And I thank Fred for being so hugely impacting in my life and career. I respected and enjoyed his leadership and his guidance. And like he said, life is a journey. And I really thank him for being a part of my career. Do you think that you can lead through compassion like Fred did? I'm sure that you can. Thank you so much for listening to me today.
Thank you, Amie. I really appreciate both your personal and professional experience and so many points about what it takes to lead with compassion and empathy. So thank you very much. We do have time for a couple of questions, and we've got one in from Zahara, who asks if you can speak a little more about the empathy circle. How does that work?
Yeah, so empathy circles are very similar to something called like Schwartz rounds. So it's a space where it's a non-judgmental space, and we talk about the not just only the pressures that we have at work, but some of the pressures that we might face outside of our workplace. So when we started having empathy circles, we started having them very early on in the pandemic because we were starting to see the ripple effect that it was having on the productivity of the team. People were fearful to come into work. People were not sure how we should work in an environment because of course we had all desk spaces, and we just had open conversations about how we felt. And it was hugely impactful because, it took us to a different place. We weren't talking necessarily about some of the things that we did within our personal life, but COVID turned everything upside down. So it just gave us a space as a team to talk about some of the challenges within our workplace because of how the pandemic was affecting all of us, not just our work lives, our communities, but our own personal lives. And it was an amazing space that we were all to share. And like we said, what happened in the circle stayed in the circle.
Thank you. Thanks. And you touched on having courageous conversations and kind of just asking how people are doing. But sometimes people don't know the language to use to ask the question or how to respond to the response in terms of a follow-up question or statement. Can you give an example of some language to use?
Yeah, in terms of having these courageous conversations, I do want to set the tone that it's important to have you need to have psychological safety. And I think that's one of the things that we don't talk often enough, but one of the ways that I would go about phrasing it, and sometimes it's actually just as simple as saying and leaving the floor open to have conversation, to say, you know what, before we get started, this is a safe space, that it's okay to speak up or to step back. Because I think also there are those times where there are some folks that are more open to speak up than others, to also allow that to happen. And then really just asking the question to say, how are folks feeling today? I think that, and then leaving time for pause, because sometimes you need that pause to actually be able to answer that question. And I think the other piece that's important is you can ask the question, but you actually have to listen. So there are times that we ask people, how are you doing? But we are actually not really listening to them. We're just hearing what they have to say, but not necessarily doing it. So it's actually about actively listening and then taking that feedback and doing something with it. So really, I think it's just as simple as asking the question and leaving it and giving the space and the time for people to respond. Silence can be very powerful.
Thank you. Thanks. And you answered one of the questions that I'd made note about, which was about creating a psychologically safe place. So that's helpful in terms of some of the language to use as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I actually saw there's actually a really great video by Amy Edmondson that talks about psychological safety and what are some of the ways that we can get to psychological safety. And this is a huge conversation that I think, not just in healthcare, but a lot of folks are having, because creating that environment where people can open up about some of the challenges that they're having. Like I said, within our workspaces now, we're seeing that more than ever, that there is that blend where you can't get away, you cannot avoid what's happening from within people's personal lives and how their work performance is affected. and having a safe space to be able to say, yeah, I'm struggling a little bit at home. Or for example, with me, I said, I have a child with autism, and I might have to go to certain appointments, and having, leadership being able to understand that there is that intersection of work and home and and communities. It's that understanding that knowing that we all have lives outside of the work. And I used to be taught that you need to check your feelings before you come into work, and you put all that stuff on the back burner. But we know that that actually doesn't work, and we know that having these conversations, these courageous conversations, talking about what may be impacting our work life is really rewarding. Because I could say that there was also another statistic that over 75% of people say that they're more than overwhelmingly willing to help folks through these challenges. So I think having these conversations are hugely important.
Thank you. And that speaks to the power of community, which you're certainly helping to build. And again, so much respect and appreciation for the advocacy work that you're doing. These are challenging times, and your voice matters.
Thank you so much, Teresa.
And thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Another informative session, and we will have a recording available for a limited time in our follow-up email, and look forward to welcoming you to future sessions. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.